I want to bring in some contrasting viewpoint. Mani Shankar Aiyar, one of the grand old men, if I may call them, of the Congress, is also joining us, and Sanjay Jha also joining us. Now, both of them have one thing in common. At various times, they've been suspended by the Congress party. Mani Shankar Aiyar a few years ago after the Gujarat elections, and Sanjay Jha at the moment. Mani, you heard P. Chidambaram saying he believes that the Congress party is opening up to democratic dialogues, this on a day when you've stuck by the Gandhi family. I repeat, are you all unable to look beyond the Gandhis?
Oh, we are quite ready to look beyond the Gandhis. But when we do, we see an emptiness. So as Chidambaram was just saying, I thought very effectively, against your rather sharp questioning, the Congress party has in fact taken on board the letter written by these 23 veteran congressmen, including a few who cannot be described as veteran, but who can be described as young. And I would like to, as I was not at the meeting, unlike Mr. Chidambaram, the only thing I have is the CWC resolution. And I would draw your attention to two expressions here. That the CWC has extensively deliberated on the letters. So the deliberation has taken place. And after detailed discussion, come to the following conclusions. So there has been no attempt at removing or suspending those who wrote the letter from even participation in the CWC, let alone the Congress party. They've also had, as Mr. Chidambaram said, 7 hours of discussion. They were not sitting there just praising the leader. They were defending their respective points of view, and probably very vigorously. And at the end of that, they came to a conclusion. That conclusion is set out in the resolution. And I do not think that because I was unfairly, and I stress that, unfairly and unjustly suspended from the party because Mr. Modi had twisted the words that I used. I think it was very unfair, very wrong, and nobody has apologized to me for it. Although amends have been made, I still maintain that it is for the party, not for either the media, and certainly not for the BJP, to determine who our leader should be, for better or for worse. That is a decision that we will take.
Okay, you made your point.
Decision
you made your point that it is for the Congress party to decide who their leadership should be. Sanjay Jha, respond to what you're hearing. The Congress has had 7 hours of vigorous debate, at the end of which, from an external observer, it looks like the more things change, the more they remain the same. But both Mr. Chidambaram and Mani Shankar Aiyar seem to suggest the Congress party is alive and kicking.
Well, you know, Rajdeep, there can be no dispute on the fact that the views that were articulated in the letter signed by, let's use the term, political stalwarts of the Congress party, both young and veterans, that has been taken cognizance of. I think it's a significant triumph for those who are believing that the Congress party needs to change dramatically and drastically to take on the formidable might of the BJP.
So what has changed? What has changed? What has changed? Are you going to have a Congress parliamentary board? Are the CWC meetings going to take place more often? Is there going to be vigorous debate within? Are you going to have the institutional mechanisms that the letter spoke about? Are you going to have elections to various posts? We don't know.
Well,
all I can see is that you bought 6 months' time.
Rajdeep, let me tell you two things here that are very, very crucial. Number one, the points that you mentioned about transparency and internal democracy, the process of having elections to Congress President, Congress Working Committee, Congress Parliamentary Committee, you have even a central election committee where historically we used to have elections for. These are now crucial points. If anybody was not aware of them, they are today, including you. And this is what the Congress party needs to restore if we are going to be a fighting fit unit to take on the BJP, because you need your people to be galvanized to take on the opposition. That's point number one. Point number two, even as far as the Congress leadership's role is concerned, if you look at the letter, it was fairly forceful, saying that you need a leader who is constantly around, is vigilant, is alert.
So where is that leader? Sonia Gandhi is continuing, Mr. Jha. She's going to continue for another 6 months.
But
she's unwell and she's going to continue because you can't find anyone else.
Well, let me give you an answer to that. I agree with you that actually the process of the AICC election that is going to happen now within the next 6 months ideally should have happened in the last 1 year. That cannot be denied. I do believe that Mr. Chidambaram, when he said that it's going to start now, must also acknowledge that this process should have been completed earlier. Having said that, let's look at the point here that in the next 6 months, the Congress party will have a new Congress president elected by a freshly elected AICC. Now, that is the INC constitution. And if we adhere to it in a steadfast manner going forward, the Congress party will go back to being what it should be. Okay. A very internally charged up, kinetic party that has a grassroots connect, and the leadership is responsible to each and every Congress worker, not to just to the people who live in Lutyens, Delhi. I think this is the change that we asked for. The process has begun, Rajdeep, and we are going to work on it from now on for the next 6 months to ensure it's delivered at the ground level.
Let me therefore ask you, Mani Shankar Aiyar, a final question. Am I right in being skeptical of this party? You've not held proper CWC elections for more than 2 decades. You've not looked beyond the Gandhi family with a brief interregnum of about 7 years of Narasimha Rao and Sitaram Kesri going back to 50 years. Are we really going to see some kind of a change? Are we going to see vigorous organizational elections held in this party at all? Or do you believe that the Congress party is at one level incapable of changing fundamentally?
I don't see why we should change fundamentally. In fact, I think we should become more fundamental. I think we should go back to the first principles. And I hope that as a result of today's CWC meeting, which is the first in-depth, detailed discussion, also an extensive discussion on both the letters with no reprimand being inflicted upon the writers, and with a promise that the Congress president will look into such organizational changes as she deems fit. And although I don't see the 6-month deadline for having an AICC session in the resolution, I'll take Mr. Chidambaram's word for it, and we'll see at that AICC session.
Okay.
But I've always maintained, on the few occasions that you have called me on this program, that the answer does not lie, and the problem does not lie in our leadership. It lies in getting the Congress back to the first principles of its ideology. And if this is an opportunity that the leaders of the party have had to speak, I'm so glad there's a reference to party fora. These have not existed adequately in the past, which is why many of us, including me, have had to express our opinions outside the party. And if we are provided this fora within the next 6 months, well and good. But I hope that even if we are not, that one of the decisions taken at the AICC will be to provide fora, not just for leaders like, the members of the CWC, but also for ordinary party workers like myself, who have not been able to have their voice sounded in the party for the last several years. I'm not talking about months.
Let's leave it there, Mani Shankar Aiyar.
That opportunity, but I want to emphasize, because you brought it up at the start, that while I was suspended, it was more than a year and a half ago, nearly 2 years ago, that I was restored to membership of the party.
I take that point. The fact though is, I still need to see whether you can really speak out in the Congress party and have those fora where you can have that free and frank dialogue. We need a strong, robust
Inshallah.
opposition.
I hope we get those.
Well, touche is all I can say. Sanjay Jha, Mani Shankar Aiyar, thanks very much for joining us. That's been our big focus on the 9 o'clock news.